Hey, this is Alan Winnick with one of my Kinetic tide machines from 2025. This one's called Slack Tide. It's about 18 inches tall, and it has two moving wooden arms between which are suspended a piece of marine rope. The rope goes slack at low tide and becomes taut at high tide. And by looking at the relative tautness or slackness of the rope, you can get a sense of what the tide is at that moment in real time. Now, again, this is a time lapse video, so the piece doesn't move anywhere near as fast as this. As a matter of fact, you can hardly see it moving at all. But by looking at the position of the rope, you can get a sense of what the tide is at that moment in real time. Now, if you want to know more precisely what the tide is, you can look down at one of the wheels in the gear system down below, and there is a spot on the wheel that's a reference point that works very much like the hand of a tide clock. And by looking at the position of that spot, you can get a very accurate reading on how many hours there are till the tide will change. Now, I call it slack tide because the rope goes slack at low tide, but of course, the tide is not called slack tide only at low tide, but it's called slack tide at high tide too when the tide pauses before it changes. This particular piece hangs on the wall and does plug into 110-volt house current. As with all of my pieces, I try to reinterpret something that we take for granted all the time, like the tide, and change it from a data point that we might read off a chart or off a clock face, and turn it into something that's more of an internalized experience. Because after all, the gravitational forces and the other things that cause the tide to change don't just act on the ocean; they act on the entire Earth and on us. And so I try to give the viewer a different angle on experiencing the tide as it changes. Anyway, thanks for visiting my YouTube channel, Alan Winnick Studio. More to come.